All right. Hey, welcome to the Joinery Business Podcast. This is a really special podcast today. I'm joined by one of our amazing coaches, Aaron Gibb. And Aaron is a really interesting individual. He's joined our coaching team after being one of our clients many years ago. So he brings to the table some really, really special skills, but also we've got a really kind of a special relationship. So today we're going to talk about his involvement with Jobman. And not only does he coach members in our program on factory efficiencies and just, how to turn your joinery business into a living, breathing, thriving entity broadly, but also specifically he is on board as our Jobman specialist to coach people and teach people how to use Jobman. So without any further ado, Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good to see you after that wonderful trip in Adelaide. I know you had a great trip with some clients. I'm not sure that any of your clients that you saw in Adelaide were Jobman users, were they?
No.
Just factory implementation this week.
Yep.
Cool.
And processes, yeah. That was a big focus.
Yeah, so we met many years ago when you were working for another business, fairly large-ish business. And my memory is you'd had Jobman, you'd purchased Jobman, or the company had purchased Jobman, but you weren't really using it. So tell us a little bit about that journey that you were on when you were back then.
Yeah, so I suppose it's a bit like any software that you buy from someone who's selling it to you. You bought with the promise that it will fix everything. And yes, it does to a certain degree, and you will find benefit. I'm not saying there's no benefit straight up, but we were struggling with double invoicing. It was a really bad time, I think, for everyone. All suppliers were sort of double invoicing, not suring if we're paying the right amount. We did a lot of manual checks.
Yeah.
So like you would pick a couple of jobs every month, and you would just go back through the invoices versus what you hopefully should have paid and what you had in your estimate. For us, that was probably one of the biggest things that we got really good value. Also, invoicing in general, just became easier. We had a very manual invoicing process where there was so much room for error, I could say. You do up a price, and then you write the price on the thing. You put that in a manila folder inside of a cabinet, and then someone else would come and pull that out, and
like we did in the 80s, the same process. So your personal experience with let's not single out Jobman here, just say any sort of more advanced systems in a cabinet shop wasn't something you'd experienced in your past, was it?
No.
So you didn't really get the help and the training on how to implement this advanced system, but once we got on board and we were actually working with you step by step to implement this system, talk a little bit about that journey, because that's what changed the game, really, isn't it? It was the help that you got at that point to implement this system to your benefit.
Yeah, so I suppose from the get-go, we did get a little bit of training. I actually went over there because I felt training is obviously the most valuable part of anything that you get. So I went over, spent some time, got the basics, got it up and running a little bit. And then, starting to work with you guys, we started to realize there was a lot more missing. So unfortunately, just like anything, we burnt it down and started again. And then realized that, we more so set it up for what I believe to be the right thing rather than what we all believe to be the right thing. So, that was another step of burning it down again and just really getting everyone involved, everyone's input to get it up and running to what it was. And I feel that's probably one of the key parts that we all miss. Obviously, we all need direction. So, the owner of the business should be handing the direction of what we need to, how we need to go. And where we need to go, but getting those employees, people doing the actual work, being able to help. One of the biggest things that I can remember that took forever to get organised, and even now I see people still struggle with like the checklists or the workflows and stuff like that. We tend to be because we're all very detail minded, we tend to sort of separate every little tiny sort of aspect and every task that is required, but then when it comes time to logging in and out of those tasks, that might only take a few minutes, like before you start to realize that this is not working. And because unfortunately, like with any system, which is a good side of Jobman, both either the checklist or the workflow sort of gives you a very structured approach to every job, and being able to get that repeatable outcome, which I found to be one of the biggest benefits. There's lots of benefits, but repeatable outcome, knowing where your jobs are, just makes it really, really simple
Well,
especially from a management point of view,
yeah.
of being able to overview where things are at. And
I think from my observation, let's say, the journey of the forward progress that you made, like now, a lot of the clients that you work with are making, is simply because if we were just to implement the current workflow pre-Jobman, you can do that, right? You can say, this is how we run the business now. Let's just put that workflow in Jobman. Great, we can do that. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's an improvement, right? It just means you're taking the old methodology of doing things and implementing it into some fancy system, rather than learning what's a better way of doing things first, and then possibly implementing that. So I know that when we worked together in those early months, and when it went on for years, I watched you grow into this. Oh, I can now see how production can be widely improved. We were aligning the machines into a straight run, and then we were getting sub-assembly areas. Now that's not something that Jobman does for you, right? But when you change the workflow into something that flows better and makes more sense, and quite frankly, dramatically reduces the lead times, and then if you implement that in the software, now we've got this massive benefit, right? So that was, that's the thing that I remember, is seeing that evolution of now we've really got something, because it was the thinking first of what's a better way of doing things, and then putting that in the software. I'd love to hear your your thoughts or your observations, because now that we got lucky when you became available, at the marketplace, so to speak. Great, let's get you on board, because not only does your experience in the industry give a lot of benefit, but your expertise with Jobman does as well. Talk a little bit about, since you've been on board and you've now worked with quite a few different clients, what are some of the common things you see with people that are using Jobman but haven't really implemented it properly? What's the common top 3 or 4 things that you're seeing?
Probably the top one that I feel, and just from experience, I see how this can make something feel really, really hard, especially you're getting started with Jobman. It can make it really, really hard, and that is itemizing out all of your tasks. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to use all the benefits of the system, and the benefits of being able to have people log into a task, complete the task. Not only does it capture actual time versus estimate, it also helps you to know where jobs are at, because it changes jobs through statuses, and whether it's a job or a lead, still does the same thing. It's great for that whole reporting side of things, but it also helps with capacity, because what you soon start to see that maybe, and I suppose at the end of the day, that's where you have that aha moment and go, well, maybe we should do this or change the way that we do this, and we make this a little bit easier, and then we can reduce that step. So it's not something that you're requiring your staff to log in and out of.
Yeah. So if I understand correctly, you're seeing that there's still too much detail in Jobman rather than simple steps, and maybe they're not in the right sequence.
Yeah, I do find sequences probably a lot, and that's one thing that we were worked hard on after getting some training from you guys. We worked hard on getting the sequencing right, because we were just like everyone else. We would cut MDF doors,
rushing to pile up parts.
We were cutting. Yeah, we were, and you would have seen the pallets and flat stacking and massive big trolley. We had these huge big trolleys. The bigger the trolley, the better we felt. So
I remember the sheer number of trolleys that I saw one time when I was on site, and I'd asked you once, how long has this trolley been here? And you said, I think a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So we had 32 trolleys.
Yeah.
As an example, each trolley was 2.4 meters long.
Yeah, that's right. They weren't small trolleys. They were really big ones.
No, really big. They were hard to push around.
Yeah.
And they sat for a long period of time. So, and that's one of the things that I see a lot of now, that it does take that, we don't actually have to have the part sitting there.
Yeah.
We sort of all really get caught up a lot in, having multiple parts sit around, because, we want the machine in case the machine breaks down. Well, unfortunately, only thing that stops the machine breaking down is like preventative maintenance and all that sort of stuff. So these are the sorts of things that we went through working with you guys. And, after doing that, that's when we then had to change Jobman again and the way that it worked. And because, we didn't need to start to worry about that. We took out all of the, I suppose, fear factor that we weren't going to commit that we wouldn't be able to get to the time that we've committed to more of a fact, well, you know what, if something does happen, we obviously had like a backup plan. And I think that's probably one of the key parts in any business. Like if your machine breaks down, no matter how far you are ahead, if it takes a week or 2 weeks to get the spindle, for instance, that's one that comes to mind.
Yeah, you need a plan.
We had a spindle blow. So, sometimes you do need to have those sort of industry relations where you can get people that might be able to help you do something. But getting to that point where you feel confident that you're cutting things in sequence, and you're following that path on every job. And I feel that's probably the one thing that Jobman does extremely well with their workflows is, we can actually follow that through. We're not overloading staff with what they've got to do or worrying about what they're going to cut next week. Very clear. I consider myself very techie, so I was like, oh, let's get the TVs up, let's get all this up. So, having TVs up and displaying agenda screens and showing people what work they've got coming up. Now, maybe it was, but they wouldn't see everything, like at any one time we would have, probably 30 or 40 jobs in the system. So having it so that the guys would only see what they really wanted to.
Just what you need to know.
That's right. It sort of helped with stop them from getting overwhelmed with the workload.
Yeah.
And that was, one thing that we did speak a lot about was, helping with people feeling overwhelmed and how can we control that.
So would you say that we helped shift your focus? And of course you do this now, but back then we were on a bit of a journey. Would you say that we helped shift your focus on looking at the whole rather than the individual components of it? Because the reason I'm kind of bringing this up is because even today, we can see all kinds of, let's call them industry suppliers, whether they're machine suppliers or software suppliers or whoever they are. Great people, we know them, they're friends of ours. Still talking about how do we cut parts faster? And then suggesting that's going to make us more efficient. That's probably not true, right? Because we can certainly cut parts faster to get it quicker to the pile to sit longer. Now, it doesn't really make us more efficient because the bottleneck is actually assembly. And we're not talking about the bottleneck in assembly. We're not talking about how fast can our assemblers go. We're talking about how do we get, the parts to be cut faster, which ultimately doesn't really make you more efficient. So was that sort of the focus that you can remember is the switch? How do we reduce our lead time rather than how do we get parts cut faster? Yeah,
and I suppose to answer, the answer that we came up with was we didn't need to cut parts any faster. We actually needed to do more things on the CNC to reduce stuff in the assembly side of things.
So you slowed machining down rather than sped it up. Yeah.
Well, and that's actually a conversation that I had yesterday about what can the machine do versus what you do, on the bench. And it is a conversation you have pretty much every day. Like, what can we do? Another example was this morning, simple things like we want to add a ventos to a cupboard. Pretty simple. You can either buy a jig or you can mark it all out. Or you can have your CNC pre-drill these holes
in 20 seconds.
Yeah, and people don't have to then think, you literally unpack the box, you push it up to the thing, it drops into its locator slots, holes, and you just screw it off. Like these things, that's where you gain the efficiency by looking at, and I know Nigel uses it a lot, like what can we do somewhere else? And it's a really good concept. And that's how that's how I was able to understand the concept of subassembly.
Yes.
I had seen it before at other manufacturers, but, and I just didn't understand how that I could apply that and how we could get that to work. But seeing the fact that, yes, it still might take a certain period of time. It might still take 20 minutes to build a cabinet. But it might be 3 different parts that are building it, and it's taken 3 minutes here, it's taken 5 minutes here, and it's taken 12 minutes over here to get.
It's so true, and I don't know what the ratio is, and it probably differs with every business. But if you were adding a minute to machining because you're machining more than rather than doing it on the bench, it might be something like a minute extra in machining on a CNC saves an hour or two at the assembly bench. It probably would be a ratio of something like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I suppose. I always remember back to when I was, when I first got a job. And back then, we had a point-to-point machine. So it wasn't a CNC, parts would get cut on a beam saw and they'd then process each part. But, if something didn't happen or whatever, you'd get out the old jigs, you'd clamp them on, you got the air drill and Like, adjustable shelves was a favorite.
Yeah.
And, like, we're very quick to look at that and go, well, if I just had a CNC, it would drill the holes.
Yeah.
Cool. But we sort of we get stuck in that, oh, well, that's all we need it to do. But what about everything else? Like, how can we pre-drill our drawer cabinet to have, locating holes for drawer fronts? And another good one is, drawer base supports. A lot of people fix little L brackets. You can buy brackets and they come with they come in the kit sort of thing. You just screw them on and they plug in just like a drawer. Like it's really, really quick.
Yeah, we can get really clever with technology, right? When I was implementing for Planet, we used to teach people how to just do a touchdown on something that wasn't seen, but would indicate that this is the top and the inside of a ladder kick, right?
Yep.
So you always knew those parts were going together the right way, because a little touchdown would just put a little half hole, and you'd say this is always at the top of the stretcher on the ladder kick, and it's always inside. Okay, so assembly gets a whole lot easier. You're just looking for that.
Yeah. And I have seen people use that for like fixed shelves.
Yeah.
So if you don't use cams or dowels or anything like that, instead of having to go the old way where you'd, mark out your shelf and then square a line off and line it up like that, you basically, there's two little holes, two little 3 mil holes. They go at the bottom of the shelf, and then that's what makes sure that we're nice and parallel.
So we're on a little bit of a campaign right now as a business. We're going to shift gears here a little bit, Aaron. We're on a little bit of a campaign here right now to help people understand in this industry. The typical cabinet business owner is a cabinet maker, that worked off a bench and became a business owner, still thinking like a craftsman, still thinking about, everything gets set up. We want to be craftsmen. I get it. We want people to believe that we're great with our hands. But back in the 30s and 40s when we had craftsmen, that's when craftsmanship was the only thing that was around. Now we've got this wonderful technology available, and we're wanting the industry to mature into recognizing that setting up is now done in the software. And all of the advancements, like the automations in a program like Jobman, can really speed things up from a business burden perspective. So let's talk a little bit about how Jobman can take the burden off of business in the same way, like a lot of people, like you mentioned quite a few years ago, we went to point-to-point machines rather than a panel saw. So that was, that's then that automation of okay, the point-to-point is going to cut the parts rather than a machinist doing it. So now we're talking about CNC machines automating that, but business automation is that's the next level of thinking, right? So talk a little bit about how, now that you're working with clients implementing Jobman, the journey that most business owners need to go on to get them to realize that we're actually trying to automate things. Because you're a techie, you're right across automations.
One of the easiest and generally no one can argue with it is our communication to clients. So, and this is just a really good example about how Jobman can simply automate one thing, and that's communication to your clients. Where your job's at, when they need to have things done by, when invoices, all these things can be set up as notifications. Even to today, you can set up the webhooks and send out text message reminders. Hey, your job's getting installed. Make sure you're awake at 7 a.m. when we come. Little things like that. Because otherwise we spend so much time. Did you ring that client? Make sure they're right for 7 a.m. tomorrow. Or did you ring that client and say, this is where we're at? Or you get to some clients when you don't have much communication, and they're like, well, I didn't hear from you. I just didn't know if you were coming.
Yeah.
So, we can take away all of that sort of, let's say, legwork that someone has to do now. It may not be you as the business owner, it may be someone else, and we're hoping that they're there, that they've done it, or, not on annual leave or sick or anything like that. So, one of the easiest automations that you can create in Jobman is having that notification go out to the client and keep the line of communication. Now, one of the biggest benefits with Jobman is the email system now is ridiculously good, because you can actually email out and receive back. So, if you are emailing things out to clients in regards to invoicing or anything, can even be to suppliers. So one thing that I have been going and talking with some of our clients is, hey, we want to get a price for this, wire basket pull out or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, instead of just going to Outlook and sending an email and then getting an email back and then go, okay, what do we do with it? We go into the supplier, or we can go into the lead and send, a lead, which is where that information for, the pre-job has been started. So that's where you're probably going to get the pricing and so whatnot.
Yeah.
we can actually send an email out to our supplier, get the price, come back, and the price all contains in there. So, I mean, this is where the benefits of automation, we don't have to go through, hundreds and hundreds of pages worth of email train. Yeah, writing it down. I remember, one thing that it was always drummed into me, like if you ring someone, you date and time it, blah, 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 and you write down what you spoke about. Just so that way, if anything come about, you had something there to say, well, actually, we did talk on this day. And it helps to jog someone else's memory. But in this day and age, a lot of people don't sort of just ring. Sometimes it's much easier to send an email. They can get to it and send it back to you. But having the ability of being able to capture that communication just for that one sense. And then, as I said before, the actual client, keeping your client informed. There's nothing better and we all do it. We buy something online, and what do we look for? We wait for the pop-up.
Yeah, the shipping date. When's it going to get here?
Australia Post. It says, "Oh, we've got your order." Yeah. The next one says, "It's on its way."
Yeah.
So we sort of can generate the same feeling. Maybe not as you don't want to have too many of them, but I always liked simple ones like, "Hey, your job's gone into machining now."
Well, this is
because they don't realize they order a job, maybe three or 4 weeks ago.
It's such a great example. Like you've
done bits and pieces.
You've brought up such a great example because one of the most common things, probably the most common thing we hear from people in the industry is about how builders always let us down, like how the builders are always late, as if that's something we can't control. But what you're talking about is sending this message to the builder to say, hey, your job's on track. It's going into machining today, and it's on track to be delivered in 2 weeks. And that's missing from a lot of businesses, right? They just, 2 months before the installation date, a lot of businesses will confirm for the builder, are you going to be ready? And have no communication at all up until that point. Yep. And just arrive with a truckload of cabinets only to find the roof isn't even on yet. So this gets your client to actively communicate with you, because they're going to go, oh crap, the joinery, they're going to be here in a week and a half. We're not going to be ready. I better contact them.
Yeah.
And that simple thing can make such a dramatic, and I'm not overstating this, the dramatic change in a business when you get those problem clients calling you, telling you the job's not going to be ready. That means that you can make some adjustments way earlier on rather than the day before or the day of going, great, what do we do now? Well, let's take the cabinets back to the shop and pack, stack them up in the corner. That means you got to unload them and then load them again and then unload, so yeah, it's huge. That's a really good example of how a simple automation step can make a big difference.
Just to sort of go over that a little bit more, like that is one of the key things. I remember that was one of the key things you said to me was, well, go to site and call them and see if they're ready. So sometimes, but once you break that sort of cycle with any client, especially if you're dealing with clients, like clients that do multiple jobs with you, that very, very quickly turns into, well, that's the way that they do it. We just need to answer what they say.
Yeah.
So, we would copy out the schedule because obviously it keeps all of your scheduling and stuff. Send that to the client as an updater to say, hey, just fill in these dates if they're changing. It gives you that notification, weeks before you should need to cut.
So let's shift gears here again. I want to talk a little bit about the reason that, and I can't talk about all, that would be a little bit wrong of me to say I know everything, but predominantly, we see a lot of people that have had Jobman that it isn't working the way it should. It wasn't implemented right. And they might be using a little element of it, but certainly not the massive benefit that this amazing software can bring. They're not really leveraging that. So our approach is, if we're talking about a client from the very beginning, like fresh Jobman user, or even one that's had it for a while, the approach should be step 1 first, step 2, step 3. So talk a little bit about, maybe not so much about the specific steps, although we could learn about that, but more about why that's so important that we go about implementing Jobman in the right sequence.
So I suppose just like any other system, it does have to be done in a sequence. And the reason for that is because, obviously job information at the end is stuff that you need to do the quotes. It's also stuff that you need to do for your invoicing and purchase orders. So it is, one of the biggest things, before we even start looking at quoting, and a lot of people get it because they're going to be able to quote faster. And that's true. You can just load it up and you could do that within a few days and you could produce a quote faster. But is it going to help you in the long run? Not really, so you want to make sure that by following following the certain steps, you can actually get to, you can actually get your system built. And then by the time you're ready to start implementing pricing, you've already got times, you've already got the operations that you're going to go with. So if you haven't had any thought of that, so realistically, I look at it, it's really setting it up from the back to the front.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It's the go slow to go fast approach, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's not built in a day, although you can, and I have seen some clients move rather quickly in certain parts.
Yeah.
But it is something that you do need to keep revising, and you do, like, the first time you go through and do it, it's not going to be perfect, but that's all about continuous improvement. We're going to get to a point that you're happy with it, and then you're going to go, well, you know what, if I do this, we can change. So getting the basics, I find getting the basics set up first is probably one of it's the most mundane, boring part of it, and you generally can go through it relatively quickly. Like even just basic things like getting your organizational logo in there, getting your setting the date format and stuff like that, putting your ABN and stuff like that in there, connecting to Xero and things like that, making sure your accounting software is all connected up, because at the end of the day, it not only, a system like Jobman not only helps the people in sales, helps the people in the production and installation, but helps accounting. And that's probably, that's all done in computer. So we don't really see what goes on and how much waste can come about that. So
it's so true, isn't it? Like, if we talk about a couple of things, if we can create purchase orders, and if we can actually have the materials being generated from creating purchase orders, either internal, because there might be stuff you have internally, or external going to a supplier. And a lot of people are saying now, oh yeah, but the supplier has an online ordering system. That doesn't mean that you don't generate a purchase order. It could just mean you don't have to send it to them. It could just represent what you actually ordered online, but it becomes tagged to that job. And then when you receive it, we then have the ability to check. The purchase order says this is how much you should pay your supplier, because even just because you've ordered online doesn't mean that the invoice that you're going to pay the supplier is the same that you ordered online. It might come in, you're expecting to pay them $1,500 and it's $1,800 from the supplier. If you don't have anything internally that creates that check and balance, what do? You pay the $800 and you just lost money, right?
Yeah. And you don't think about it.
You don't even know, because you don't have that check, right? So you're so right that ability to create these things, but it is that beginning stages of setting up a system that a lot of people want to jump over, because it seems like it's too hard and it's not important. I just want to get a price sent out there.
Yeah.
The other thing that you just said, I think, is totally relevant and really, really important. Like if we duplicate what the old Bundy clock used to be, like it's all well and good to be logging into jobs to track the time that you're spending on a job. But what's really important is when people are here, you have to pay them whether they're on a job or not.
Yeah.
So if we can actually get production to be having people log in when they get here for work and log out when they go home, and that can be verified by a production manager. And then because the verification of the production manager is the last check, someone in the finance department doesn't know whether the guy on the assembly bench was there or not. The production manager does. Production manager verifies that. And then what does the person in finance do? They just pay the wages. Yep. What do we actually see in most cabinet shops? We often see the person from the finance walking down on the factory floor and going, what did you write on this thing? What is this? Yep. Did you finish up at 8 or did you finish up at 9? Like what's actually, that's, you know what I mean? That's reality of what we see. A lot of this is with people that have Jobman, still having these archaic ways of just paying people.
Yeah. And it does really help to keep track of what you got to do. I mean, I know just from my experience of having to do payroll at some point, that whole having to go and check, and then every payday you're out there, you're checking on everyone because someone hasn't checked, or maybe they've been here but they just didn't turn up, or they didn't log in or something like that. So I think now with Jobman's clock on and clock off ability, versus actually like the old timesheets used to go through logging into a job, logging out of a job. But now, you clock on at whatever time.
Yeah, you're here. You gotta be paid.
Yeah, that's right. That records all your time. And it's no different than, a lot of other businesses in other industries use, Clockify and other sort of apps that the workers have got to come in and they clock in on that, gone are the days of the old Bundy system.
Yeah. But it's the same theory,
you've got
right?
to go through that. Yeah.
Same theory. You arrive for the day.
Theory.
Yeah, you got to be paid. And so I've always been a huge advocate of keeping the clocking into a job separate from clocking in to be paid, because it is a separate thing, right? You're here in the morning, great, notify that you're here. And then when you go to your bench after the pre-start meeting, it might be half an hour after you arrive, log in to start doing a job. Okay, now we're not tracking a person necessarily, we're tracking the time allocated to build that job. So
That's right, yeah.
It's a very different thing. Now you've had some time in the seat of actually being a proper Jobman trainer, you had the trip over to Perth to spend some time with Jobman as a company. Talk a little bit about how, if someone just wanted to implement Jobman as a software, what are some of the first steps that you would do? Like what are the first 1, 2, 3 things that you get sorted right away?
Look, I think probably the most important one is the workflow in the job side of things, because you really can't do that much without that. You can't really set up your pricing unless you're just guesstimating times. The next one would be your lead workflow. I think they're probably two of the most important ones, only because, that's what gives you that structured approach. It takes all the anxiety out of employees from, oh, what have I got to do? Or I've got to rush. No, I don't need to. This is how I do it. And I just follow this. And every day, these are the things that I need to do, which makes it really, really clear. Like, if I get this done, I always reference it back to that's how you win the day. So if you can tick off that you've done your tasks, so cool, I won the day, I've got everything done. I think they're probably the two biggest ones, and probably the job one being the most important. The other one after that, I feel, is probably it's a toss up between a couple of things. Probably a lot comes between, organizing your products. Right. And when I say products, it doesn't mean that we're going to have, a base one door, then we're going to have a base one door with finger pull, and then we're going to have all this. In some circumstances, you need that because of the limitations from like CAD software and the integrations that come from the CAD software. But at the end of the day, I always find if you set your products up first, put the CAD software integration aside for the moment.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we want to set our products up so that we can do our quotes. And we've already got our information from our job operations. So we want to be able to make the most out of that. So I think they're probably the three things that I would make sure that I set up correctly first.
Yeah.
Everyone, setting up the materials catalogs is relatively easy. They do have some supplier integrations, which makes that even easier. But some, they sort of have a 3-tiered level, good, better, best. Working with some of them are a bit harder, but like you look at ones like Hafele, for instance, and we talked earlier about should we have to order it online and create a purchase order? Well, you still create a purchase order with Hafele, but instead of actually sending it off to them or faxing it off or whatever, you just basically click a button and it actually connects to the Hafele system.
Yeah.
And just automatically logs all that, keeps all your pricing up to date. So, like all these sort of mundane tasks that you would do monthly, well, we should be doing monthly, I should say that, checking prices and making sure our price lists are correct.
Yeah.
These things just, if a price rise comes through, it automatically updates that price rise for you.
So what I love about what you've done, Aaron, is you've structured, let's call it a training and implementation approach to getting Jobman up and running as quick as possible, but you're also requiring any new user or any current user, they might have been using Jobman for a few years, still Same requirement, to go through these basic steps without skipping the steps. There's got to be these fundamentals. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of other implementation people out there that are trying to implement a system like Jobman will really just teach people how to go through the steps without having your background of the industry as to where does the real value come into it by working with you, is really things like naming conventions on your inventory.
Yes.
Like you want to talk about how you're going to name your product so that when all of it goes into a database, are you using capitals? Are you calling it 12 mil or are you calling it centimeters? Like what are we actually naming things? You get a bunch of people with inputs, they're going to be all over the place, and finding anything is going to be really hard. Are you looking for the board thickness? Are you looking for the board? Are you looking for the supplier? So I really love the structured approach that you brought to this that brings everybody together in one way that works for everyone, basically.
And that is important. Like just touching back on the naming convention, like you see people that they'll have, they might write 3 products, for instance, HK, HL and HF, for instance.
Yeah.
But then they'll write Adventos after it. So But realistically, if we call it all Adventos, when you start to use the search function and you start typing in Adventos, it'll automatically pick up those. But if you have HK first, it
goes right
sort of
to
will
it.
pick up a bulk. No, well, it goes a bulk.
Oh,
lot
the bigger,
of
the bigger
things.
result.
So yeah, if and another good one is paint. We talk about painting when we're doing pricing and stuff like that, and a lot of people will go, like matte paint or gloss paint or whatever. But just having a paint has been the first word, because it's like most search, it just works off like 3 letters, and then it will slowly reduce the list as you go.
Yeah.
And yeah, like to me, it is naming convention. And you can ask anyone that I've worked with. I'm very quick to go, whoop, that's got a space between it. That hasn't got a space. Like very, very, very particular.
And the great thing about this is you bring real life experience to a technical implementation, which is, quite frankly, it's really unusual. Most people who are technical don't have any real life experience. They don't see the bigger picture. They're just looking at the technical reasons why things happen. And so I think that's the reason why we're getting such amazing results with the Jobman implementation. Is because, unlike other technical trainers on how to use systems, you're actually bringing hands-on, battle-scarred experience to the table.
It's a good way to put it.
Specifically around how to implement Jobman, which is you've walked that road yourself. So I love seeing it, because the end result, the feedback we get from people is, oh man, we've had this system for 2 years, but never really used it. And now we're really seeing the massive benefit to it. And you can't get any better than that. That's fantastic. So kudos to you, because you really bring a lot of value to the table. And you've also allowed us as a business to be able to open up the doors to people that are not coaching clients. And if they just want to run through a Jobman implementation process that's structured and gets them on the right path, even if they've had Jobman for 2 years, then they connect with you, and then we get them on that path. So it's exciting. It's exciting times, because there's so many people out there I see that need this help.
And it's good. It's good to see people start to get value out of what they're paying for. So
yeah, and the bigger picture also for you is that you can see when you're working with a client, you can see they have broader needs.
Yep.
Then, because you're connected to the broader coaching, we use Monday to connect everything up in one environment, for example. That might be your sales and your marketing. That might be defect tracking, so many other things. Then you're in a position to say, hey, Jobman does this, but what you're actually missing is this other element of what runs your business rather than your workflow. And so that gives you a unique position with clients. If someone was thinking about buying Jobman, but they were worried about the implementation, what would you say to them before they contact you?
Before I contact, so I mean, you really need to have a plan. It's not something that you just want to pick up, because you can pick it up and just modify stuff on the go, but then you just end up with a bowl of spaghetti sort of thing. So I think the biggest one, is you want to have a plan of what you're trying to do, whether that is the current way you're doing something, or whether it's trialing a new way of doing something that you're happy that it's working.
Yeah.
So that's generally, I think, probably one of the biggest things that we talk about. Like, how's your workflow going? Does it work for you now, or why have you got the software to try and make a change?
Okay, so if someone's thinking about buying Jobman, I think I'm going to put words into this here, if you don't mind. Figure out what the investment in Jobman, what problems it's actually going to solve. Specifically, how is this software going to improve your business? So whether that's more profit, whether it's better, sorting out your quoting, what are the things you're actually, because there's probably, if you look at it, there's probably 25 or 30 things that Jobman's going to do over the course of implementing it. But what are the top 2 or 3 things, I think, is what you're saying that we're going to nail early on. And what about somebody that's
100%.
what about somebody that's had Jobman for a few years? Because there's all kinds of people out there like this, that hasn't implemented it properly and maybe struggled to get it working. What would be the first thing you would do with them once they get on board?
Exactly the same thing.
So it doesn't change.
No, because if we do change it, then you're going to get a different outcome than someone else. And regardless of how your business runs or what you do, so whether you do cabinets or I've seen Jobman, it's not just for the cabinet industry. I've seen sheet metal workers use it and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's probably the best thing is to start with that structured approach. So we want to nail down that workflow, especially in the manufacturing side of things. Because once you've got that, at least planned out what to do, it makes all the other parts, like makes the lead workflow, it makes the quoting part go better, it makes staffing, everything like that seems to just work easier.
Yeah, and I'm willing to bet that for some people, when we say workflow, they're not really sure what we mean by that. They know their workflows, but what do we mean by workflow? What we mean is actually mapping out the step by step sequence that happens when a job comes into your business. What's the first step? What's the second step? Including the sales process, because like you say, you're going to put that lead stage checklist into Jobman. Well, that's a checklist. That's a step-by-step process. So unless you have that first, what you're saying is you need to do that first before you can even really implement the software anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you can do it and wing it all the way. But if you want to get the benefit, I believe if you want to get the benefit, and coming from someone who's had to build it, break it, you soon very, very realize that having those things in place, or at least an idea. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like a lot of people say, we need to do all sorts of graphs and maps and all this sort of stuff. But literally, as long as you have an idea and you've got it listed down in the steps that you need to follow, that is a great place to get started.
Yeah, and if anybody doesn't know how to create a workflow, we can obviously help them do that. It's literally probably a half an hour session where we can start mapping out a swim lane document or any other kind of document to just start getting clear. Well, this has been great, Aaron. I love your work, and I love the results you get with clients, and looking to see more of that. Obviously, the more people get on board, the more benefit they're going to get. Anything else that we've missed in this little chat around Jobman yet that you'd like to mention?
Probably too many to list in this time frame, but look, I just think at the end of the day, Jobman helps you to take control of your operational workflows. And this can be right the way from sales. So it sort of helps guide all the staff members in all separate sections. So yes, it's not a business management software, although it does have certain parts that help help certain processes in business. But for operational software, CRM, all that sort of stuff, it definitely nails it out of the park for the majority of the stuff. So
and I just want to mention too that as a coaching business, which is what we are, we coach businesses. We wouldn't be extending this offer to people with Jobman if we didn't have you on board, Aaron, because you're right, it teaches people how to do that. Without that high level coaching and training and implementation support, we wouldn't be able to give the value to the industry that we are right now. So you're kind of the difference maker, because the tool is theirs, Jobman is there. A lot of people have had many kicks at the can on this one and not really getting any farther down the road. But you changed the game because you know what's needed to make it happen. And that's a really amazing thing. So if anybody's listening to this podcast with myself and Aaron and you want to learn more about Jobman, either have it or you want to thinking about getting it, or you just generally want to improve your business, feel free to reach out. thejoinerycoach.com, book a call, and it's easy. We can have a 15-minute chat. I think there's also a place that you can book a Jobman conversation only on our call booking. Aaron, awesome. It's been great. Thanks for spending some time.
Not a problem.
Awesome. Love your work. And we'll see you again soon.
No worries. Catch us.
Cheers.